Welcome back to Arkansas, where we try to make sense of the issues affecting Arkansans. Today, we're going to talk about what's on your 2024 ballot, specifically Issue 2, an amendment requiring local voter approval in a countywide special election for certain new casino licenses and repealing authority to issue a casino license in Pope County, Arkansas. Issue 2 is an amendment to the state constitution, so if it passes, it would exist as the highest legal standard in the state, above all other state laws, and it could only be changed in the future with another amendment, either from a citizen's petition or referred by the legislature. Issue 2 is pretty simple in terms of what it does, but the story of how it ended up on the ballot is important to understanding who it would benefit and why we're even voting on it in the first place. So let's dive in. By the 1950s, Oak Lawn Horse Racing Track was a staple of Hot Springs, a destination for people across America who would come to Arkansas to watch and bet on horse races. And in 1956, Southland Greyhound Park opened in West Memphis with betting on dog races. At the time, the Arkansas Constitution outlawed lotteries, but didn't define what those were, and some anti-gambling people tried to argue that betting on animal races was a form of lottery. Now, that argument failed in court, but people who enjoyed gambling wanted to make sure it didn't come up again. So that November, Arkansas voters passed an amendment to the state constitution explicitly allowing horse racing, plus specific kinds of betting. The next year, the state made it legal for any Arkansas county to open a horse or dog racing track, if the people of that county voted to approve it. That's called local choice, and it's gonna keep coming up. Oak Lawn didn't want to be just a racetrack, though. They wanted to be a racino, able to host card games and dice and slot machines, but the legislature had banned those things. So the only way to make it happen would be a citizen-initiated amendment, the kind where you gather signatures to put a change to the state constitution on the ballot. In 1964, Arkansas voters went to the polls and saw an amendment which would have allowed casino licenses, but only in Garland County, where Hot Springs is. Not only did that amendment fail, but the arguments over it brought increased attention to all the illegal gambling already happening in the state, which led to a crackdown. So for decades afterwards, betting on the races at Oak Lawn or Southland was the only legal way to gamble in the state. There was another attempt to legalize casinos in Garland County in 1984, but somehow it did even worse. At the time, casinos were illegal not only in Arkansas, but in every adjacent state. But then things changed really quickly. In 1987, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled states could not stop Native Americans from operating gambling halls on tribal land. The next year, Congress passed the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, which allows basic kinds of gambling on all Native American lands and full-on casinos if the tribe makes a compact with the state. That had a massive effect on Oklahoma, home to a huge number of Native American reservations. The Arkansas-Oklahoma border exists specifically because of Native American territorial boundaries. Go watch our video on the shape of our state if you want to know why. The important part for now is that two tribes have land bordering Arkansas, the Choctaw and the Cherokee. Shortly after the Indian Gaming Act passed, both began building gambling halls just across the state line, kickstarting a rivalry for Arkansas business that leads directly to Issue 2. But things weren't just changing to our west. In 1987, Louisiana legalized video poker machines, and then in rapid succession, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Missouri all legalized riverboat casinos. As the places surrounding us kept building casinos just across state lines, more and more Arkansans crossed those lines to play. So the question was, would Arkansas also legalize casinos? And that's when a scheme developed. What if a business wrote an amendment legalizing casinos in Arkansas, but only ones controlled by that business? They could spend a lot of money paying for canvassers, convincing people to sign, and trying to persuade voters, but it would be totally worth it because if the amendment passed, that monopoly would be written into the state constitution, so it could not be undone by the legislature. Between 1994 and 2016, 12 amendments creating casino monopolies were approved to gather signatures, an average of one every voting year. But all of those attempts failed. Either they didn't get enough signatures, they were thrown out in court, or voters said no. In 1994 and 96, those proposals came from Arkansas-based people and businesses, and most of them included a casino license for Oak Lawn. But starting in 1998, the proposals all came from outside our state, and left out Oak Lawn and Southland. Some even placed limits on those racetracks to make sure they didn't compete with the new casinos. But Oak Lawn and Southland were happy to spend lots of money fighting back. For example, in 2016, Cherokee Nation businesses funded an amendment to create 3 casino licenses, which would go to Arkansas-based LLCs, who conveniently agreed to let Cherokee run those casinos. Oaklawn and Southland donated about $1.5 million to the anti-casino group Protect Arkansas's Values, and they used that money to fund the lawsuit that got the Cherokee Amendment thrown off the ballot. So the only way an outside casino group could expand into Arkansas without opposition would be to combine forces with Oaklawn and Southland, and that's exactly what happened in 2018. Backing up a bit, before Arkansas was even a territory, the Quapaw tribe made their homes in what is now the eastern half of the state. Eventually, they were forcibly removed to what is now the northeast corner of Oklahoma, where they're still headquartered today. After the Indian Gaming Act passed, they built both the downstream and Quapaw casinos, but they also began to wonder if it might be nice to reestablish a presence in Arkansas. By 2014, they had bought some of their old land back near Little Rock. They were participating in historic and cultural events around the state, and they had started a conversation with city leaders in Pine Bluff about writing an amendment to build a casino there. And unlike past attempts, they included Oaklawn and Southland in those talks. The Quapaw's first draft created 3 casino licenses, but didn't specify where. Instead, the state was supposed to award them based on guidelines from the Arkansas Economic Development Commission. Basically, they were supposed to go to the counties that would benefit most. But the Attorney General rejected that draft, in part because he said the method for selecting the county would be too difficult for most voters to understand. They were also advised by some state legislative groups that they should include one more license to generate more tax revenue. Based on economic need, distance from other casinos, and a bunch of other factors, the 4th location they chose was Pope County. The final amendment authorized 4 casino licenses, 1 each for Oaklawn and Southland, 1 in Jefferson County within 2 miles of Pine Bluff, and the last in Pope County within 2 miles of Russellville. And unlike the amendments from previous years, this one did not specifically guarantee those 2 licenses to any particular business. Instead, it set up an application review process run by the Arkansas Racing Commission, or ARC. The amendment only includes a few requirements and limitations on owners, like they have to demonstrate prior experience running a casino, they have to have a certain amount of capital, and the 2 licenses cannot be held by the same company. But there is one very specific criteria. Each application has to include either a letter of support from the county judge or a resolution in favor from the quorum court, which is basically city council but for a county. And if the casino is going to be inside city limits, it must also receive a letter of support from the mayor. The 2018 casino amendment had a lot of things going for it, but most of all, money, thanks to 3 mega donors. The largest was the Downstream Development Company, run by the Quapaw tribe, and the next was Delaware North, the massive gambling and hospitality group that owns Southland Greyhound Park. Coming in a close third was Cherokee Nation Businesses. By this point, Cherokee owned 10 casinos in Oklahoma, including some a stone's throw away from the Arkansas state line. And they had been the sole group behind the casino effort 2 years earlier, so they had clearly been eyeing an expansion into Arkansas and planned to apply for the Pope County license. But the 4th largest donor, after a long drop-off, was Gulfside Casino Partnership, owners of Island View Casino Resort in Mississippi. Their group had not been involved in any previous attempts to bring casinos to Arkansas, and though their donation came fairly early in the process, it was barely anything compared to the big 3. And also, all the casino licenses were spoken for. Finally, while Oaklawn didn't donate in favor of the amendment, they also didn't fund its opposition like they had the last election, and that left the anti-casino people basically broke for the whole campaign. There was a small group of Russellville folks called Citizens for Local Choice who tried to get the amendment thrown off the ballot, but they failed. So, with relative widespread support, in November the issue passed and became Amendment number 100 to the Arkansas Constitution, the Casino Amendment. What happened next for 3 out of 4 casinos was pretty straightforward. Southland and Oaklawn upgraded into full-fledged racinos. The Quapaw tribe applied for and easily received the Jefferson County license, and in 2020 they opened Saracen Casino. And then there's Pope County. Pope County residents did not know they were going to be included in the amendment until it started gathering signatures, and when they found out, there was some resentment that a casino was being forced on them with no local input. So they quickly drafted a petition of their own, which said neither the county judge nor the quorum court could give their necessary approval for a casino unless there was a yes vote from the whole county first. That measure passed, and candidates promising not to grant casino approval won both the Russellville mayor and county judge elections. And Pope County voted 61% against the casino amendment, the largest no vote in the whole state. The people of Pope County had made their opinion clear. They did not want this casino. But there's a deeper layer. For months leading up to the election, casino companies who hoped to get that Pope County license had been meeting with and making presentations to government officials, including the outgoing mayor and county judge. The judge decided not to run again, and the mayor lost his race. But on their very last days in office, right before they were replaced by the people who promised not to give any casino approval, the outgoing judge and mayor wrote letters endorsing the casino proposal from Gulfside. And this is when the trouble begins. So in January of 2019, the ARC met for the first time with all their new powers and duties, including creating the casino license application rules. One of the rules they passed mirrors the part of the amendment about having to get those letters and/or quorum court approval. But they added a new rule that approval has to come from the person or people holding office at the time of submission of an application. And since the application process hadn't opened yet, that would invalidate those last-minute letters for Gulfside. The commission opened up submissions that May, and they got 5 proposals. One from Gulfside, one from Cherokee, 2 we won't cover, but the last was from the Choctaw Nation. By this point, the Choctaw had a chain of successful casinos and had been competing with the Cherokee for decades for Arkansas gamblers' business, especially in the Fort Smith area. So, 5 applications, except none of them were valid because the mayor and county judge had stuck to their word and refused to write any supporting letters. So 4 of the groups had no letters at all, and Gulfside was relying on their old letters, which according to the new rules were not valid. So all 5 proposals were rejected for not meeting the requirements. At that point, those 3 groups, Cherokee, Gulfside, and Choctaw, each decided on a different path forward. The Cherokee decided they wanted to get the required approval, and the best way to do it was to win the hearts and minds of the elected officials and people of Pope County. So they started getting involved in the community. They opened up a storefront downtown. They gave to local charities. They set up shop at the county fair, all the while trying to convince people that their plan would bring in enough jobs and revenue to be a net positive for the area. And it started paying off pretty quickly. By 2020, they had the support of the county quorum court, the county judge, and the mayors of 5 cities, though Russellville's mayor was still holding out. Meanwhile, Gulfside decided their best move was to go to court and argue that their letters should still count, so they should get the license. It took 2 years with a lot more drama in between, but in 2021, the Arkansas Supreme Court ruled that no, those letters did not count, so Gulfside could not be awarded the license. A few weeks later, the ARC awarded the license to Cherokee and to their partner in the proposal, Legends Hospitality. But the casino amendment says the license can only go to one business. Gulfside saw an opportunity and challenged the license, tying things up in court for 2 years again. Finally, in 2023, the issue was resolved. The ARC had to do everything over again, and the license was awarded just to Cherokee. They never did get the support from the mayor though, so they planned to build their casino just outside the Russellville city limits. Meanwhile, the Russellville folks who had tried to get the casino amendment thrown off the ballot formed a new group, Fair Play for Arkansas, with the goal of repealing the Pope County casino license. And since Amendment 100 is now part of the state constitution, the only way they can do that is with another amendment. In 2020, they wrote a petition and tried to gather signatures, but they barely raised any money and got nowhere. But in 2022, they tried again, this time backed by millions of dollars from the Choctaw. The Choctaw had not been able to gain any of the local support they needed for a license, and they had no grounds to challenge for it in court, so they decided if they couldn't have the license, no one should have it. That would mean less competition for their casinos in South Oklahoma, and would also mess over their casino rivals, the Cherokee. The 2022 attempt failed to gather enough signatures, and also resulted in some messy accusations that there had been bribes and threats and canvassers lying to get signatures. We do not have time to get into it. The important part is that the same group the same people on the paperwork, the same donors, reformed in 2024 as local voters in charge, and they are the ones behind issue 2. So it should not be surprising that as of October, the Choctaw have donated nearly $9 million to them. So any ads or mailers you've received for issue 2 came from them. Also unsurprisingly, the group against issue 2, Investing in Arkansas, is funded by the Cherokee, who would very much like to keep the casino license they fought for 6 years to get, thank you. They've spent over $11.5 million against issue 2. So what does issue 2 actually say? It has 3 major parts. Part 1 goes through the existing casino amendment and removes the right to a license in Pope County, as well as all references to it. And it cuts the total number of allowed licenses from 4 to 3, so that leftover license can't go anywhere else. Part 2 revokes any Pope County licenses already issued. That's the one given to Cherokee. And then Section 3 is the brand new rule. It says if a constitutional amendment in the future adds another casino license, the county awarded that license would have to vote yes to allow the casino, or else the license would not be issued. So now you know what issue 2 would do. But before we jump into the arguments for and against, you might have heard some people talk about this amendment being confusing. Specifically the idea that voting yes means no casino, and voting no means yes casino. But I think there's an easy way around that. Right now, the rules say there is supposed to be a casino in Pope County, right? Issue 2 is an amendment, as in a thing that changes the law from the way it is now. Now, there is supposed to be a casino. So the question is, do you want that to change? Vote yes or no. And with that squared away, let's talk about the arguments for and against issue 2. The first argument in favor of issue 2 is this. By creating a 2-step process for adding any more casinos, first state approval and then county, issue 2 will make it harder for future casinos to happen anywhere in Arkansas. That's clearly a positive for folks generally against casinos, but it's also good for people who think casinos should be legal, but should not be too widespread or easily accessible. Think about the way we treat certain vices in America, like alcohol and cigarettes. While we haven't outlawed those things, we have made them harder to get through restrictions and extra taxes. And here in Arkansas, we even have certain counties that don't sell alcohol at all. Now, there's no law stopping you from driving a county or two over to get it, but by requiring that extra effort, there is an assumption that some number of people will decide it's not worth it. That can be especially helpful for people who are trying to stay sober. Making the thing just a bit more difficult means the people who want it can still engage, while helping other folks say no. Some folks feel the same way about casinos, so they think issue 2 would have a positive effect. People who really want to gamble could still drive to Oaklawn or Southland or Pine Bluff or even other states. But by reducing the total number of licenses and making future licenses harder to get, issue 2 would make it harder for people to engage in gambling casually or on a whim, and some folks feel like that's a good reason to impose some limits. Here's another argument for issue 2. Long-term studies of the effect of new casinos on communities are a mixed bag. Some cities saw huge economic benefits, but some didn't. Some saw an increase in poverty or crime or divorce, but some didn't. The point is, it's unpredictable. But those areas always begin to plan their budgets around that new tax and tourism income, which is also unpredictable. It depends on the whims of people and also on a private business continuing to operate well. If the casino is mismanaged or suddenly shuts down, the city is left scrambling to cover those shortfalls. By a lot of metrics, including GDP and poverty, Pope County has been steadily improving since 2010. Some folks in favor of issue 2 say removing the Pope County license would allow the area to continue that trend without creating economic dependency on a casino, and without taking a gamble on potential side effects. There's also an argument that issue 2 rights a wrong. Pope County voters were overwhelmingly against the casino amendment, and installed city officials opposed to it. They even passed that law that required a countywide vote before anyone could give approval, even though that was later removed for conflicting with state laws. While some folks claim the people of Pope County have changed their position since then, the 2018 election had a much larger sample size than any opinion polls. It's potentially the best data available, and that data suggests the casino license is not wanted there. And the final argument we'll make for issue 2 is the one local voters in charge makes. Every county deserves to have a say in whether or not there's a casino there. When the 2018 amendment passed, it forced a license on Pope County with no regard for local opinions, and right now there are no safeguards against the same thing happening again. Whether it's from out-of-state interests or even the existing Arkansas casinos deciding to franchise, right now there's nothing to stop another company from funding another amendment, creating a license and forcing it on a county regardless of how locals feel. In fact, they're already trying. In 2020, just 2 years after the original casino amendment, a group pushed another one to authorize 16 more casinos. It was rejected in court, but the point still stands. Casino companies will keep trying to write themselves into our state constitution. And while any new amendments could technically overwrite the provisions of Issue 2, getting Issue 2 into the state constitution might prevent them from trying in the first place. If Issue 2 passes, then Cherokee Nation businesses spent millions to support the original amendment, to buy goodwill in the community, to put together proposals, to fight multiple lawsuits, to fight Issue 2, only for it all to amount to nothing. That might be a clear enough warning to other prospective casino groups. Either build up good relations with the community first, or stay out of Arkansas. So, if you want there to be fewer casinos in Arkansas, or if you want to repeal the Pope County license specifically, or if you believe requiring both a state and county vote is a good barrier to make sure any future casinos are supported by the community, then you'll want to vote yes on Issue 2. Now, let's cover the arguments against Issue 2. Opponents of Issue 2 say that it does the opposite of what it promises to, and is attempting to trick voters in a few ways. For starters, Issue 2 claims to create local choice, but it doesn't. True local choice would be something like our state does with alcohol sales. No county is forced to allow it, but they all have the option. The choice is only up to the voters of that county. The rest of the state does not get a say. Issue 2 could have been written that way, and that's what its advertising makes it sound like. But that's not what it does. Instead, Issue 2 would still require the whole state to approve any new casino license first. Only if the whole state approves first does the county get a vote, and there's no way for a county to legalize casinos on its own or even request a statewide vote for a license. So in reality, Issue 2 gives counties more power to say no to casinos without making it any easier to say yes. That decision still depends on a vote from the whole state, and that is not local choice. What's more, Issue 2 also destroys the existing Pope County license with no option for local choice there either. It would have been super easy to just let Pope County vote on whether to keep that license or not. In fact, Issue 2 creates the exact blueprint for how to hold that kind of vote. But instead, Issue 2 removes the license and reduces the total number of licenses too, so no one else can get it either. If Pope County voters did want a license, under Issue 2 they'd have to wait for another initiated constitutional amendment, and once again they'd be at the mercy of the voters of the whole state. So Issue 2 would not create true local choice for the state, and would take away the choice from Pope County voters. Supporters of Issue 2 claim that's okay because locals don't want the casino, but opponents say that's not true. While Pope County did vote against the 2018 amendment, there have been more elections since then, including for the officials whose approval is required for the license. That Pope County judge who said he would never approve a casino, but then approved Cherokee, he was re-elected afterwards. So were some of the quorum court members and mayors who gave their support. The lone holdout was the mayor of Russellville, and he lost his election in 2022. People against Issue 2 say that now a majority of Pope County voters do want the casino, and that's exactly why Issue 2 does not allow for a local vote, because the anti-casino people backing it know they would lose. Remember, this exact same group tried to repeal the license in 2020, just 2 years after the amendment passed, and could not get enough local support even then to make it happen. It's only because of the money from the Choctaw that they made any progress. So opponents say they're using that money to try and trick the whole state into believing Issue 2 is what Pope County wants. But it's not. And finally, let's not forget what all this really is. A giant money slap fight between two massive businesses, both of them using locals to obfuscate the clear financial incentives driving their positions on the amendment. The fact that they can both casually throw millions into this campaign should be an indication they will continue to do just fine regardless of the outcome. But people against Issue 2 say that even if it was only a ploy for approval, Cherokee has actually invested in the community and done some good. They've put together a casino plan which claims it would create a lot of jobs and revenue, and they've convinced plenty of locals that it's worth supporting. They're here to make money, but in a way that may benefit a lot of Arkansans. Meanwhile, after Choctaw lost their bid, they didn't even try to win over the community. The most money they've spent in Arkansas is the millions they've funneled into the anti-casino groups. And with Issue 2, they're trying again to force a massive state-determined change onto the people of Pope County, and they're doing it for the money. They're counting on Issue 2 to help funnel business away from Arkansas and into their Oklahoma casinos. Folks against Issue 2 say that either way you vote on this, you're supporting a casino company. But it's better to reject Issue 2, and in doing so, reject the company that doesn't even pretend it wants to bring our state any benefits. So, if you feel like Issue 2 claims to create a local option, but actually only benefits the people against casinos, or if you think the voters of Pope County have indicated they've changed their minds so their casino license should not be removed, or if you see this as a giant proxy war between businesses but would prefer to support the one that at least claims it's investing in Arkansas communities, then you'll want to vote no on Issue 2. And that's it. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget, early voting has already started and Election Day is November 5th. If you like this video, share it with somebody. You can also check out our other ballot issue videos and our content on Arkansas history and politics. And if you want to help us keep making these videos, consider supporting Arkansans on Patreon. With Patreon, you set exactly how much you want to pledge to help the channel each month, down to as little as $1, and you can change that amount or cancel anytime. A big thanks to our current GoRo level supporters, Tim in Vegas and Caldwell, plus all these other folks you see on screen now. Thanks again, and see you next time for more Arkansans.